Here I am with Dave Thompson, and today we're going to talk about Dave's tips for success. And Dave is an expert in sales, and you own several businesses, Dave?
That's right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So my main business is called hannah.co.uk.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really interesting business.
Now, when you were growing up,
Yep.
apparently there were some teachers and all that didn't think you were going to do very well, mate.
Yeah.
Tell me about this thing in school. How did you do in school?
So in school, so I grew up, I was born in 1969 in Scotland, and in a little mining village in Scotland, and we left Scotland to come down to England in 1974. My parents, they liked to go out on the beer quite often, you know, I guess it was pretty much how it was at the time, and so I spent a lot of my weekends in pubs or clubs or, you know, doing
That's shocking behaviour, mate.
So that's where we grew up. But it wasn't just a misspent youth. We spent our youth pretty much going to pubs and clubs. For my sister, it turned out to be really well because she turned out to be the world pool champion, 4 times ladies world pool champion. So fairly successful family.
What's your sister's name?
Linda Ledbetter. She was
fantastic.
Linda Moffat. So yeah, so our misspent youth in the pubs and clubs was how it was. When I went to school, my biggest priority wasn't a case of going to school and doing my work because my parents were pissed. There was arguing and fighting going on every single weekend, and I was a tough kid at school. You know, I grew up in Scotland. I came down to England, being half Jamaican, half Scottish. In the 70s, when I grew up, there was a programme on telly called Roots, and another one called Love Thy Neighbour. And so when you heard, you know, some of the names that kids called you at school, you sort of fought your way through, and that was that. You know, that was how it was at that time. So my upbringing was interesting. We were evicted from our council house for not paying the rent. We had the electric cut off. The only reason we never had the gas cut off.
Not paying the rent. That's shocking behaviour. I bet no one that's watching this has been fallen behind on their rent.
So, you know, people have these things.
Yeah.
And so my upbringing was traumatic.
Yeah.
I was the hard kid at school, but doing my schoolwork wasn't the #1 priority. And so, you know, at 14 I beat my dad up, so that tells you what kind of kid I was at school. I was like, and he kept beating me up every time, and I was in a children's home for a bit. So at 16 when I left school, it was a case of, I left like my arse was on fire. I got no qualifications and I wouldn't have got any. And the teachers, you know, they didn't hate me, I just didn't go to school that much because I didn't have to. My parents were like, go to school, and I'm like, I ain't going, what are you going to do? And when I say my dad, it wasn't my real dad, it was a step dad, an angry little Scotsman called Jimmy. He was a white guy, and he called me all the profanities under the sun. So, you know, there was some suffering going on there. So 16 I left school, and I went and I got kissed goodbye by my teachers. They said, you'll never achieve anything in life. And I was like, hey, if you're any good, you wouldn't be teaching me in this school. You'd be in a good school like you. And so I went off into the army.
How did you turn your life around then? I mean, because you come up through as very negative. I'm having some tea from world top speaking coach Doc Voice.
Yes.
And I've got to have it because it's so nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How did you turn your life around?
So at 16 I left school and I went into the army, and I was well balanced. I had a chip on both shoulders. So, you know, somebody says they've got a chip on their shoulder, I had a chip on both my shoulders. But going into the army was really good. I'm dyslexic, so, you know, I got into the army on the bottom rung, I got in the infantry. And that's all I would have got into at the time. I took my test and they said, you qualified to be a soldier. So I qualified to be a soldier and I went into the infantry. But what I found was that I felt safe in that environment because everybody's on the same level. We all got our head shaved, we all put these green coveralls on, and then we're all off learning the same thing. What I managed to do was, because I'm determined to be successful, I was the best recruit at physical training, so I was the fittest. And also, I was quite clever. They took time with me because they'd probably seen lots of kids like me in the army. And I thrived. I went and I did really well. And I ended up passing out training as the best recruit in physical training. I then went to the battalion, and they started doing inter-company boxing. And that's where I put one of my first shadows, you know, I got it out of the way. And that was being a kid, being in a children's home, having your father beat you up and stuff like that. I always wanted to be tough. So nobody could ever hurt me or anybody close to me ever again. That was never going to happen. So they brought out this thing called inter-company boxing, and I entered for it. And I remember at the start of the boxing, I wasn't the best boxer, but what I was the most determined. And the one place you don't get tired, in a boxing ring. So I was really fit. And so if somebody was hitting me and they were battering me for 2 rounds, in the 3rd round, I just put my gloves down and say, now it's my turn. And so I won, and I ended up getting voted the best boxer in the battalion, in the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Anglian Regiment, which was a big win for me. So I'd got some recognition. At school, I was good at sport as well. I was the rugby captain, so I was in charge of the rugby team. I was the best at cross country. So throughout my life, I've always been good at winning. And you know, when you're in an environment, in an ecosystem whereby you either go and you do everything your parents say, or you do nothing they say. What I decided was, whatever they said, I'd ignore it and make up my own mind, because I looked at their life, which from my perspective was totally fucked up, and I thought, well, whatever you say to do, I'm not doing that, because you guys don't have a clue on how to run a successful life.
You said they like to drink. I mean, were they alcoholics?
I don't know if it was alcoholics. I mean, what is an alcoholic? Somebody that has a beer every weekend, and every time they've got some money, they like to do that. Were they addicted to it? No. But we're in the pub as much as we had enough money to be in the pub. My man liked to gamble as well. So it was like, you know, it was a rock and roll lifestyle, you could say. Yeah. And I was called a black bastard and battered at every possible opportunity. So, you know, it was really a case of dragging yourself through that. But what I looked at, or what I thought was, you know, I can't wait to be bigger because I want to kick my dad's head in, because, you know, he's getting it, because, you know, he kept beating me and my mum up when we were kids. I mean, we were really poor. Like, I remember, like, at 7 years old, you know, we never had any food because he'd been to the bookies and spent all the money. So me and him went to the allotments, and we were digging potatoes out of the ground and putting them in this little bag, right? Yeah. And then people coming and shining the torch, and we're doing a running away with the torch to get away from it. So it was traumatic, and you had to fight to survive to win.
Can I say, you know, so they were caught saying racist remarks about you?
Not they. My stepfather was, not my mum. My stepfather.
Yeah. How did you? Was there anyone else that was calling you, you know, these names and stuff like that?
It was in the society. So in the 70s, you'd got Love Thy Neighbour, so they would call you Nignog or Sambo or whatever on the telly. So it was the social norm at the time. Yeah. You'd got Roots, and you know, and it was just acceptable. And so if you're black or you're Pakistani or whatever, you're getting some abuse. Yeah. You came in the 70s.
Or Welsh sometimes.
Yeah, Welsh.
Or English when we kick your ass at rugby.
I'm a jock. I'm a jock.
Oh, so, they are. Well, they did well in the World Cup, didn't they?
So being ginger to now was what being black was in the 70s.
So how did you handle it though? Were you just like, oh, you know, like fuck you and?
Well, one of my best characteristics is my determination. I'm massively determined. I'm like, if I die, I'll stop, and if I don't die, I'll keep going. So when I was in the army and we were doing our training, I just wanted it more than anybody else. I was more determined than anybody else, and I just think, if I die, I'll stop. If I don't, I'll just keep going. So that was my mentality, and I just thought, well, if I die, you know, everyone's going to die at some point. So I just kept going. And how did I get out? I guess I believed that one day, or I'm a bit of a spiritual being. I think one day it'll get better. One day it'll get better. Keep going, keep going,
hope.
Keep going. Yeah, hope, faith. I had a bit of faith.
How important is hope?
The most important thing from my perspective is having the right mental attitude. It's about having a positive mental attitude. You want to be successful in anything, and then taking a step forward. So going the extra mile and having the right attitude. So at 21, I came out of the army. You know, I'd been in the army, and I thought, let's get out of this place, because you couldn't do anything that was any good. You know, you're in the army, you're a glorified cleaner most of the time if you're in the infantry. So that's what they're putting you into, a cleaning role. And then sometimes
you didn't want to be a cleaner, mate.
And so sometimes you get to be soldier. Well, I was a cleaning supervisor, so I got a stripe. So I was a cleaning supervisor. So it was okay, but it wasn't right. Yeah. So the big thing I did when I was 21, I left the army and I got a job which most people would consider to be a bad job, but it was a great job, and it was working in a shoe factory. And you know the Dr. Martens, the airwear boots.
Yeah.
So I was working in the factory that made Dr. Martens airwear boots. In 1990, and it was a brilliant job, right? And you might think, well, brilliant job. You know, it was. I had nobody telling me what to do. I earned my own money, and also I got to see an amazing system. So the army was an amazing system. So I went to work in this manufacturing place where they started making airwear boots. And what they don't do is put 15 holes in one boot and then 17 in the next. They've all got to be identical. They've got to be perfect, and they have time. You know, there's time, there's process, there's a system. So I started studying and looking at that system of how they manufactured stuff. And behind that, when I was in the army, there's a system for doing the army. There's standard operational procedures. There's actions on. There's a plan. Everything's planned and sculptured. So you know that were my great foundations, if you like, for going off into the business world.
Yeah. And what did you do? You know, you went off to be a successful businessman, and how did that come to be?
So I read a brilliant book, an amazing book by one of the most amazing people that have ever walked the planet, and I'd recommend you read it personally, and I'd recommend everybody reads it because it was an incredible book. Now I'm dyslexic, so reading a book for me is like climbing Mount Everest. You know, it just ain't happening, mate. I ain't doing it. But I got this book, and it was called The Success System That Never Fails, by a guy called William Clement Stone, who went to create the Aon Corporation, so AON, who are on the front of Manchester United's football shirts, their training complex. They're not now, but they were. And anyway, this guy created that company with $100 and just a good idea. So I read his book, The Success System That Never Fails, in October 1990. And the first day I read 65 pages, sitting between the boxes in Griggs's Shoe Factory, listening to Sinead O'Connor saying Nothing Compares to You, listening to Soul to Soul singing Back to Life, Back to Reality. And at the minute I read that book, I knew my life was about to change. I read the book. In the book, he said there's 3 things you need to be successful. Inspirational dissatisfaction is the biggest motivator in the world. So if you're pissed off with what you've got and you're inspired to do better, that will motivate you. But he said the 3 things you need to be successful are inspiration to action, so get off your ass and do something, activity knowledge, and then know-how. And I thought that was it. And he was talking in the book about there were more salespeople in the world that were millionaires than there were doctors. And I remember thinking, God, there's doctors down at Linden Avenue in my hometown in Kettering. There's other doctors St Peters Avenue. There's other doctors, surgeons everywhere. And I thought, wow. And I thought I could make it as a salesman. I thought I could do that. So I read the book, and I thought this is fantastic. 65 pages the first day, and I thought I'm going to go and work for this company. I'm going to go and work for this man. So I got a job working at his company, which is Combined Insurance Company of America, and started learning his system for sales. And he taught me about Socrates and his philosophy. He taught me about positive mental attitude, which is the right mental attitude in any given set of circumstances, incorporating the plus traits of life, such words as hope, faith, and integrity. PMA equals can do, will try. And so I learned that and I applied it.
Do you think anybody can be successful? You know, people that are like struggling with their job, struggling with life, you know, their relationships are broken up, there's someone that they love have died, they've lost their job, all of this sort of thing. Do you think that they can turn their life around?
I don't think anybody can do anything. I know that you can do and you can be and you can have the things that you want, providing you're prepared to do the work, providing you're prepared to do the work in terms of the learning, because we're all the same, we're all flesh and blood, we're all bones, we've all got an opportunity. Most people go inert, most people don't do anything if they're not being successful. So it's like, I want this, okay, what action are you going to take? So, and I'm not just saying that from my perspective, I've studied this and I've got a philosophy that you know, I'll share with you and I'll tell you some stuff about it that proves this beyond reasonable doubt. I mean, some of the stuff that I came from, I'm dyslexic, I came from absolutely nothing, you know, like minus nothing. You know, we were thrown out of our council house. But the biggest thing is you need to learn stuff. You need to like, well, okay, how do people think and act? And then how could you think and act like them and to be successful? And then also you need help.
So it's a case really of, you know, you need to humble yourself to listen from people who have done what you want to do or better than where you are now, sort of thing.
I'm the biggest thing. It starts with education. People talk about the importance of an education, but sitting in a classroom, you know, getting educated up and a bit to the left, so you learn about humanities and science and maths and English. That's not it. You need to learn from the people that have been successful in life. So what I started doing in October 1990 is started learning about the most successful people that have ever walked the planet and how they focused, what they thought about, what they act, you know, what were their thoughts and actions.
Hit me with them, because we've got like, we're limited with time. Hit me with, let's say to the people out there, which people did you study? Socrates?
I mean, Socrates is interesting if you want to learn sales.
Yeah.
But let's imagine you're in a sales environment and you wanted to be really good at sales. So you'd need to learn about neurolinguistic programming is an interesting concept. A couple of guys, John Bander and Richard Grindler, worked out how language works.
Yeah.
Another guy called Robert Cialdini, he worked out how influence works today. Another guy called Oren Klaff, he's a really interesting guy in terms of how he pitches multi-millionaire, billionaire people for money to raise capital for businesses. You know, he's really interesting, he's really successful. Going back to some of the old days, some of the old guys like Napoleon Hill and his philosophy, science of success philosophy. So the story of Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, I must tell you this, I'll tell you nothing else. There's a guy called Andrew Carnegie who was born in Dunfermline, Scotland on the 25th of November 1835.
I'm smiling because I've read about all these people.
So Carnegie gets to 11, he's in Scotland, he's going nowhere. His parents jump on a boat like the modern day refugees coming out of Syria and, you know, hope to land in Greece. Well, he landed in America with his parents. He gets his first job as a bobbin boy in a cotton mill factory on $1.20 a week. And he had to work because his parents were skint. So a 12-year-old kid sent out to work. Andrew gets his next job working on the railroad, working with a guy called Tom Scott. And the railroads is America's biggest business. And he's a telegrapher. Bright kid from Scotland, bit unique, gets taken under Tom Scott's wing. And Carnegie, because he does so well and he's clever, before you know it, by the time he's 21, he's running the biggest business in America. He's running the railroad. So Tom Scott gives him a job to build a bridge across the Mississippi River. Right, and it's a mile-wide bridge. And at the time, all bridges are built of iron. So he says, build this bridge for me. So he goes and he has the idea of building it from steel, not iron. I'm going to build it from steel. But at the time, all they made from steel was brooches, knives, and forks. Right, and you're not going to make anything from that. And the reason it did that is because steel was expensive and it took ages to produce. To do a steel girder for the railway took 2 weeks. So Carnegie then has the idea of building it from steel, goes around the world, meets a guy from Sheffield called Bresmer, gets the Bresmer press process. They can make a steel girder in 15 minutes. He builds this bridge across the Mississippi River. Amazing. Carnegie goes on to become one of the richest people in the world. More richer today than Bill Gates and Warren Buffett's put together. Worth over 300 billion. He actually had that dough in cash. 300 billion in today's terms. So Carnegie is a miser while he's working, people working for him, but then he decides he wants to give back to humanity. And he wants to give back the way that people can go from rags to riches. And so what he does is he takes this young reporter called Napoleon Hill and he says, work for me for 20 years, I'll introduce you to the richest men and women in the world, and you write the science of success philosophy. Napoleon Hill does it. 20 years studying Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, William Wrigley, all the richest people, and he writes writes a book called Think and Grow Rich. Everybody should read it, great book. But he also creates the science of success philosophy, which are 17 principles that anybody can use to be successful, which are, first thing, positive mental attitude, the right mental attitude in any given set of circumstances. Next thing, the ability to go the extra mile. Next thing, about having faith. Next thing, budgeting time and money. So he writes this philosophy, 17 principles, and he creates it. And he did that 100 years ago. And more people have read that philosophy and studied it and become successful than anybody else in the world. He's made more millionaires than anybody, billionaires today. So I read that and I decided that it was cool, really relevant, really interesting and useful to me. So I bought the rights to it. I went to the Napoleon Hill Foundation and said, hey, this is great. It was written 100 years ago. Let me rewrite it. Let me modernize it. Let me teach the public, the world of today, how to be richer, happier, more successful. Let me teach them the practical application of a positive mental attitude in terms of not how to read about it, but how to do it, how to apply it to your life so you can do a positive mental attitude, how you can do going the extra mile, how I can show you in film, you can read the words, you can understand it, and you can get it. So I've been going through over the last few months, rewriting the science of success philosophy, taking current modern day examples, people that stand up today that are undeniably truthful. It's undeniable, it's truthful, it's absolutely so nailed on. So you put your hat on and say, okay, that is what karma looks like. That is what framing looks like. That is what the epitome of a positive mental attitude looks like. And I've been rewriting it and modernising it from today. And what I've looked at is people like Martin Seligman. So Martin Seligman, I don't know if you know about him.
No.
So he's the modern day father or founder of positive psychology. And so what I mean by that is 25 years ago, Martin Seligman's a psychologist and he's working with people that are committing suicide, they're killing themselves. And what he found was those people, and he wrote a book called Learned Helplessness, how people learn to be helpless. So he wrote a book called Learned Helplessness. And in that book, what he noticed was people did this. They went A, B, C, and then stopped. They played the victim. So there's an adversity, an event happens. Somebody runs into them. They nearly crashed them off the road in the car. What their belief is, oh my God, everyone's an idiot. They're a dickhead. I don't want to do them. The consequence, they're going to be pissed off and miserable all day. Or my other half's left me. That's the adversity, the belief. Nobody's ever going to love me again. I'll never find anybody. The consequence, I'll get stuck. And that's how problems work. They go A, B, and C, and then there's a ceiling. But then what he started doing, Seligman said, there must be something more to this in life. How can I take this adversity, this belief, and this consequence and do something about it? So he started working with real positive people, the winners of this world. And what he noticed was they did two things extra. They did a D and an E, a D and an E. And the D was disputation. And they either did it themselves or they went and spoke to somebody. So in your instance, if you've got a real problem, who do you go and speak to?
Who do I speak to?
Yeah, who do you speak to when you get stuck on something? It's doing your head and you get stuck.
Well,
friend?
If I mean for myself, if I've got a problem and I know somebody already knows how to sort that problem out, I'm just going to go to that person.
So you go to that person. So what he found was the really, really good people, they said, okay, let's see if I can dispute this problem, right? And they said, well, hold on a minute. You were on your phone when you nearly got ran off the road, or you have put 3 stone on since you met your missus, so you supply she went and slept with somebody else or left you with somebody else. And so there's a disputation, and there's an energization. Okay, I need to get back in the gym. I need to lose some weight. Maybe I can win her back. Maybe nobody was killed. I didn't go in the water when I crashed my car. So he noticed there was a D and an E. There was a D and an E, and either the D was a disputation from yourself or somewhere else. And so it was. And he wrote his next book, which is called Learned Optimism, which has this in it, and it's interesting. And I thought, well, that's definitely part of what a positive mental attitude is, because effectively what he's doing is he's changing the frame. That's a 5-step reframing process. So adversity, belief, consequence. How can I reframe it and change the way I look at it so that I'm not paralyzed by what happened, I'm actually energized to move on? And that's what we all need to learn. How do we reframe negative situations into positive situations?
This is it. I was just talking to one of the stars of SAS, who wins Llewhellin, and we were talking. I got locked up a few years ago for something I hadn't done, and I got shipped away. Nobody knew about it, and so I was in this facility, and basically I was going around. I was quite enjoying it, and I said to Ollie, I said, for all they couldn't understand how I was so happy in that place, and for all the thing is, I interpret things how I want to interpret them, and it's like, for all they knew, I was in fucking Disneyland. Do you know what I mean? I was
Absolutely.
like, none of you are going to come into my thinking. I will think my way out of all of this. I ended up having a breakout. I was on the run from the police. It's a long story, but, and I ended up claiming my freedom because of it. And it's a funny thing, because many people will be accused of something, or something's going to happen in their life. And they're going to be like, shit, no, I'm the victim. Fuck being the victim. Fuck being the victim, And then you got to step up to the plate. And that's why I'm here now and not in some fucking mental institution and dribbling around. I shouldn't laugh about that, because that's happened to thousands of people. But yeah, absolutely. Quickly, in a paragraph, biggest enemies of success.
Biggest enemies of success. So the opposite of a positive mental attitude, people think, is a negative mental attitude, which is the wrong mental attitude in any given set of circumstances, incorporating the negative traits of life. NMA equals can't do, why try? People think that's the opposite, but it isn't. It's not the opposite. The opposite of success is inertia, who, like Circe, the Greek goddess, turned men and women into swine by saying, stay here, do nothing. So the biggest thing is people do nothing. They go inert. And that's the biggest. That's the biggest enemy of success. People going inert, saying, "Well, what can I do? Poor little old me. There's nothing I can do. This happened to me." The key thing is you're going to be here. You've got to keep moving. So if you want to be successful, you've got to have the right mental attitude. Get the good people wrapped around you. So one of the key things to be successful is to have a mastermind alliance. That's from the Science of Success philosophy, and that is 2 or more people work in a spirit of complete harmony to achieve an objective. So if you want to be successful, you have to have harmony. So I'm here with my great friend today, Dr. Voice, who's been teaching me some wonderful things.
He's the man.
And so if you want to be successful and you want to learn to sing in the 21st century, then and forever, and win and be the best version of you that you can possibly be, then you have to have that mastermind alliance, and obviously that's what we have. And the most important thing is you've got to have complete harmony. So you've got to be open and honest about what is so. Then you tap into the power of the universe to be really successful.
And Dr. Voice is the world's leading success vocal coach, and he's just trained Sam Smith, I believe.
Yeah, well, Sam Smith's won. Sam Smith's won in a
one
line.
of the lot, and he's just won Grammys and Brits and everything.
So it's easy to look at the big shiny one and say that's one, but you look at the man behind the mask, and there's a million that follow Sam Smith.
Yeah.
So he's one of a massive amount. The guy that's behind us up here, I don't know if you recognise him. You see this guy up here?
I can't see.
Jermaine Jackman, so he won The Voice.
Man.
Yeah, so Jermaine Jackman. So, there's not a picture of him because he's a good lad. He was in here last week when I was here. So, all the great people always have a coach. So, Tiger Woods, when he was at the top of his game, had Butch Harmon as his coach. So everyone has a coach. And that's where that mastermind alliance comes on. Two or more people working in a spirit of harmony to achieve an objective.
Yeah. Dave Thompson, I could literally sit here and listen to you for about 5 more hours because I'm buzzing off it, mate. It is. How do people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you? So
my company's called hannah.co.uk.
Yeah.
Go to the website. So you can send me an email, david@hannah.co.uk. And if you want some help with something, and ask, and I'll probably help. If it's sales, I know it's sideways.
Yeah.
And if you just want to say hi, then great.
Are you on Twitter and Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. You'll find my face on Facebook, of course, as everybody's on Facebook. And I don't tweet very often. But I'm just me. But you can find my company, hannah.co.uk. We do mortgages, we do insurance, we own a law firm. And I've managed to achieve those things with no investment from nobody, just built on my own from the stuff that's been learnt here. And so if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's fantastic. And books as well. You mentioned some of the Napoleon stuff. And people can go on Amazon and get. Yeah, so if you want some recommendations in terms of some amazing books, I can send you my top 10. So I've got my top 10 YouTube, my top 10 books. Just drop me a note, and I'll copy you in on some great stuff. And if you want to learn to be a star and sing like the stars, then go to drvoice.tv, because this man is a legend. Yeah, he is, absolutely. Dave Thompson, it has been an absolute honour and pleasure, my friend. Thanks, Mark. You're a star. Top man. Thank you, sir. That was brilliant, man.